Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms, my name's Stuart. Let's take an early look at the armies of Grand Cathay Arcane Journal.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems and offer custom items to suit your club or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Make sure you check out their Old World compatible range. It's expanding all the time. New ranges are being added soon. Look at these fantastic generals tokens to help those of you who are forgetful remember in-game effects and spells and things like that. And look at these Old World Legacy Army token sets as well. Again, more of these are being added all the time and very nice they are. Check out the link in the video description.
So just before we dive in, thank you very much Games Workshop for sending this and the cards, and if you can see behind me pretty much all the miniatures as well. I've been very lucky, very appreciative, and there's going to be lots of content based around that as well. So you're probably watching this video first on pre-order day, and there's going to be lots of content coming over the weeks afterwards. I'm recording lots of stuff at the moment and working behind the scenes, painting the army, painting all the miniatures. There will be a big army painting video coming up. That's probably coming after this. Who knows? I may change the order of my release, but do subscribe if you haven't done already to find out all about the entire Cathay release, my thoughts on building and painting the miniatures, and maybe even getting some of my first games in as well. The other thing I'd like to make a note on, I'm going to review the whole book, not just the rules at the back. And there's nothing wrong with the content creators to go straight for the rules. I know people are super interested in that. Maybe even more people are just interested in that. So I'm not making a comment on that, but I love the total hobby. I love painting, I love the lore, I love the background, I love casual gaming and narrative gaming, and I am also interested in competitive gaming as well. So I'll try and make a bit of a comment on all of it, and I will definitely talk about the whole book, not just those back sections at the end. But anyway, with all that said, let's crack on into it. Now, I'm not going to spend an awful lot of time on the card pack. Needless to say, we have cards for all of the magic items and talismans and things that you can find in this booklet, including the 2 spell laws as well and a few little extras. They're very similar to all of the other sets that we have out on the market for all the other factions that get released alongside the Arcane Journals. Where these are different, these cover everything that's in the book, where for the other factions, they only cover what's in the Grand Army, not what's in the Arcane Journal as well. So that's a nice touch at this stage. Whether that remains as consistent if they release a second Arcane Journal to Grand Cathay, and we'll come on to that a little bit later in review, I'm not so sure, but they are lovely things to own if you're a collector and you want to own it all, collect it all for your given faction, but they're not necessary as such for gaming because all the information is also found within the book. As with all the other Arcane Journals, the book is a 48-page, full-colour, glossy, and in my opinion, very nicely produced and presented book. It contains a good amount of lore, and to give you a setting, and of course, the full army list as it stands for Grand Cathay, and this is a Grand Army list rather than the armies of infamy that we've seen in the other Arcane Journals. And that's the first point of note to this being different from all the others. All of the other 9 core factions have their Grand Army list, either in the Forces of Fantasy or the Ravening Hordes book, and then their respective Arcane Journals have had an expansion on those lists with 2 alternative ways of building lists called Armies of Infamy. So if you are new to Warhammer the Old World, this book looks the same, but its main difference is it's for a brand new faction, and actually what's in this is their standard army list, the Grand Army list. So let's delve into the book properly, and lovely front cover art. As always with these books, I'm a big fan of the current art style and the direction of this game. And I also really love these inside cover designs as well. There's one for each faction and they are pretty cool. Now the first half of this book, much like the others, is lore and its background. And it's giving you a setting for your army. And I suppose one of the differences for the Grand Cathay faction compared to the others is it's not something old and returning, it's something new. So they're having to write something, not quite for the first time because this has been developed with the Total War 3 game in mind, However, it is new to a lot of tabletop players. They may not have engaged with this at all unless they played the computer game. And I'm not going to read the lore to you. That would be silly, but I'm giving you an idea that the overview is very much as you'd expect from previous Army books, and then this current edition as well. The history of Grand Cathay dates right back to the old ones and their dealings with those, so it's well worth having a good read. But let's have a look at the map here as well. I love maps. I can't wait for this to be updated, and the interactive map, and zoom in and maybe zoom out a little bit more because you can't see the coastlines and things here as well. The focus seems to be at the moment around the northern provinces. We have Miao Ying, which is the dragon that's been released or being released at this time. I'm not sure when she's going to be out. And we have Nangao at the top, mentioned a bit as well. It's almost a little bit like a Cathay version of Nuln. A lot of the canon and stuff is made there as well, and all that focus around the Great Bastion, so their version of the fantasy Great Wall of China at the top. But you do have some other dragons on the map as well. You've got Xiao Ming, Yan Bao, and Li Diao down the bottom as well, and then Ying Xiang is the dragon himself. So you've got a lot on the map there. Really looking forward to finding out more and more detail about that, and more about the faction as it is expanded and told to us in the future. And much like all the other background histories and lore, the tale is very much that of growth and peril over the years, and periods of strife and difficulty, but also periods of growth, and how the nation has grown to the stage that it is now, how the empire has grown to the stage that it is now, the development of black powder weapons for its people, talking about the cannons and the rockets, the development of the sky lanterns and the ability to fly longer distances using the Silk Road with some larger distances balloons, but also using the sea as well, from the east sailing around into the west from the eastern coast of Grand Cathay with the Yin, the sea dragon as well. So hopefully we'll see more things like that. But again, go and enjoy the lore, go and read up on that, and maybe it'll give you some cool ideas for your own armies. We get to the first colour plates of the Arcane Journal, pages 12 and 13, Armies of Grand Cathay, and we've got a terracotta sentinel. And then we've got Jade Warriors and Jade Lancers, and it says that they are painted to the heraldry of their city. And I think this is Nangao in the north, as far as I can tell. I love a uniforms and heraldry book. I don't think we'll get that, but an article or something that showed some of the paint schemes from the other provinces and cities would be really cool. I don't know how much they change. Obviously, people can paint them how they want, and I'm sure people will as well. But then we move on, and we've got even more of the lore building slowly towards the current time period. So from back history, more towards what's going on now, or at least how the empire is run. And we've seen that with the other Arcane Journals as well. That's pretty standard. Now this is where this Arcane Journal differs from all of the others. At this stage, normally we're moving towards the current Old World timeline, and we get a little story of a campaign in a certain area, be that in Westerland in the Empire, being that in the Laurel Forest for the Wood Elves. But this is different here. We don't get that. And with that, we also don't get the attached narrative scenario. It just doesn't exist in this book at all, and that's where it's different from it being an Arcane Journal, which leads you towards a storyline or a narrative with two armies of infamy, and one of those armies of infamy nearly always matches with that sort of localized, more micro story. This still stays pretty macro in its storytelling. Yes, it does move you towards the current time period and what Cathay is doing at that time from a global sense, but we don't really get any great sense of what Cathay is doing in the old world. And I feel that's something we've probably got to come. And when we see the army list a little bit later on as well, I can't believe that there isn't a second Arcane Journal for Cathay coming. How soon that will be, whether that's the next book or something we see next year. But I think there will be a follow-up relatively soon that brings Cathay then into the old world, maybe with a couple of armies of infamy that introduces some of the units that will really round out this army, because as we'll see later on, is a lovely start, but it definitely has some holes in its roster and it needs some gaps filled. But that brings us nicely on to the armies of Nangao. And as I said, this is the single army list. There's not two introductions and two different armies of infamy here. We have one Grand Cathay army list, and it's a Grand Army list. So we have the little bit of a blurb and the background that gives you the story. Let's talk a little bit about Nangao and the great city at the north, which is again what we're talking about. And it feels like the Grand Army list is centered around the power towards the north of Grand Cathay, and Nangao being one of the main centres of that. So be it the Altdorf or the Nuln of the human empire, this is the centre of the Cathay Empire, and I can't believe we won't see other flavours via Armies of Infamy in the future. So let's have a look at the Grand Cathay composition list. Characters up to 50% of your total points spent as standard, and there's 0 to 1 Cathay and Dragon per 1,000 points, 0 to 1 Shikengan Lord or Lord Magistrate per 1,000 points, Shikengan, Gatemasters, Gatekeepers and Strategists as well, and they're your second non-Lord level characters. Core 25% as standard in the game for most regular Grand Army lists as well, and they consist of Jade Warriors and then 0 to 1 of Jade Lancers per 1,000 points. So there's not a lot of extra core there. I'll comment more on that in a moment. Special, standard as well, up to 50% of your points value. Jade Lancers appear again there. That's a normal home outside of the restrictions above. 0 to 3 War Machines per 1,000 points from the Fire Rain rocket batteries and the Cathayan Grand Dragon. And then if your general is a Shikengan Lord or a Shikengan, you can take a Sentinel in your special, and if your general is a Lord Magistrate or Strategist, you can take a Sky Lantern as a special choice as well. So you've got that flavour built in depending on which way you're building your army list. And then rare, we have Sky Lanterns and Cathayan Sentinels, and that's all that's kind of Cathayan in the list. And then mercenaries, up to 20% of your points value may be spent, and then allies up to 25%. The allies lists are Dwarven Mountain Holds and Empire of Man, and then you've got Bretonia, Wood Elf Realms as suspicious, and then you've got High Elf Realms as well. And then you can take a Gatekeeper as a battle standard bearer for 25 points. And then also in reverse, there's a little box there, Cathayan allies in reverse. So all of the ally combinations above work in reverse for those armies as well. So if you've got an Empire army, you can take Cathayan allies and so on. But let's crack into the rules, and the first profile we have is Miao Ying, the Storm Dragon herself, and the dragon of those northern provinces. And she has 2 forms that she can change between human and dragon form. All this is well reported and well known. She has 2 profiles, and she's obviously slightly stronger as a dragon. She's 485 points, so not cheap. It's going to take up a big chunk of your points list, and I've built an army based on what I've been sent, and she is not in there. I don't have that miniature. She's the one miniature I don't have. But if she is going to go in there, she's going to take a lot of your other toys out, as you can imagine. So it'll be interesting to see what armies look like with her in there, but she's still pretty cool. So she's weapon skill 7 in human form, 8 in dragon form. Obviously a high ballistic skill in human form, a lot stronger in dragon form, a lot tougher in dragon form, 7 wounds across the board anyway. She's in dragon form and she dies. She has a way of coming back with a number of wounds. If she dies in human form, she stays dead. Leadership 10 as you can imagine, lots of attacks, and loads of complicated sort of special rules and troop types and things. And I'm not going to read every single page of this. Chances are this has already been leaked anyway and talked about ad nauseum. But she's a level 4 wizard, but level 2 when she's in dragon form, and then she can choose from battle magic, elemental and high magic, and then loads and loads of special rules. Celestial forged armor, so she's got a 5-up save there. Disdain of dragons, hatred, chaos warriors and denomic models, magic resistance -1. Mastery of the Storm Winds, Mastery of Elemental Winds, Stubborn, Supreme Matriarch of Nangao, Transformation of the Dragon, Will of Dragons, Wrath of the Storm. So lots and lots of stuff going on there. And then in addition, when she's in human form, she has Rallying Cry. When she's in dragon form, she has Fly 9, Large Target, Stomp Attacks D6, Swift Stride and Terror. So she's a pretty good dragon overall, and she's a pretty good level 4 user. I think a very, very versatile profile, and I'm sure lots of people will be running her. She's just too good in one sense or another. Disdain of Dragons is based around challenges, and if you want to make a challenge in the combat that she's in, you have to pass a leadership test first, and also you cannot refuse a challenge from her. Mastery of the Storm Winds basically means that she can give up 2 of her spells rather than the 1 randomly generated, and then replace them with a signature spell from either the laws of Yang and Yin, which we'll see a little bit later on, or the spell here, which is the Storm Dragon's Fury. Supreme Matriarch of Nangao, and she has to be your general if she's in your army, which makes total sense. but it basically is a way of upgrading some of your Jade units. A 0 to 1 unit of Jade Warriors, 0 to 1 unit of Jade Lancers may be upgraded to Celestial Dragon Guard for 1 point a miniature, and they're not quite as expensive as something like Eternal Guard in the Wood Elves list, so it's not something that would, I don't think, outprice them. So if you've got it as your general, you'll be tempted by this, especially as it means that they get a +1 modifier to their weapon skill and their leadership as well. That makes them quite buffy, but they've got decent leadership, and there's decent leadership in the army, but they're definitely things worth taking. But I think even better is they get the Celestial Armor 6-up special rule, which is a ward save, and an example of the Jade Warriors, I think they've already got a 4-up save as standard as well, so 4-up and then a ward on top. And they're not super, not cheap, but they're not as pricey as some of the infantry units out there, and they're pretty good for that. Wrath of the Storm, and all units of Jade Warriors and Lancers, including an army led by Miao Ying, get the Hatred special rule that she has for Warriors of Chaos and Demonic models as well added. So that's pretty cool. Very thematic. Like it a lot. Then Talons of the Storm. Combat, that's a strength as user, -2 AP, armor bane 1, magic attack, strike first, and then Dragon Fire, which is the dragon's breath weapon, flaming attack, strength 4, -1 AP. Then we have a page detailing the Cathayan Dragons special rules, and this will obviously apply to the future Cathayan Dragons rather than being included in her profile. This is a sort of a standard thing, and it's because it's the first miniature or profile in the game that can change between the two forms. So it tells you what they are in human form, which is heavy infantry, then dragon form is a behemoth. I talked earlier on about if you're reduced to 0 wounds as a dragon, you then get the D3 wounds and return in human form. If you die in human form, you stay dead. And it talks about how you go about transforming and how that works on the table in relation to other miniatures and the distances and things. But I won't read every word to you, but that's basically what those rules explain there. So that's the big fun new character, but let's get into the real core of the army, which will make up most people's lists for playing the game. And we start with the Shikengan Lord on Longma. So Shikengan Lords of the Celestial Host. The first thing I noticed, and you'll notice as you look at this profile, is that this is the only magic user in the army list outside of the dragon itself, and they come on the longbow. There's no foot version of a magic user. That if you play Total War, there are, I think, alchemists and things. There are different types of magic users at this time. This is your magic user, and you have to take it on this flying beastie. So it definitely kind of limits your build in one sense or another, and makes your army work in a certain way. So you've got your Lord level character, and you've got your General, your Shikengan General, which is your lower level character. The Lord level is 220 points. The level below is 145 points. Leadership 9 or 8 respectively, and then weapon skill is 6 or 5 respectively as well. Fairly normal human stats with a slightly higher toughness of 5 there. Wounds is obviously a split profile, or a joint profile rather, with the Longma as well. So you've got 7 or 6, and then your initiative is 6, 5, and then 4 on the Longma itself. Attacks 4, which is relatively standard with the Lord level characters, 3 for the level below. It's a monstrous creature on a 60 by 100 mil base. Again, if you see the miniature in my future videos, it feels a little bit janky. The wings stick a long way out at the sides. It feels like it maybe should be on a slightly wider base, but that's not super relevant, I suppose. Now, the Lord is a level 2 wizard, and the General is a level 1 wizard, and they know battle magic, elementalism, illusion, and high magic. And then they can also take extra little things. So they've got a Celestial Blade, which we'll look at the weapon profiles later on, Cathayan Lance, and they can have a Dragon Fire pistol, and they can replace their light armor with heavy armor, and then they can choose, well, they must choose the Law of Yang or the Law of Yin, which are the standard laws, and they are swap outs for the signature spell, the same way as you've seen with some other laws in Arcane Journals. And the Lord may be a level 3 wizard for 30 points, a level 4 wizard for 60 points, and can purchase magic items up to 100, so pretty standard stuff you've seen before. And the General may be upgraded from a 1 to a level 2 wizard for 30 points, and have magic items up to the value of 50 points. Special rules: Armoured Hide 2, Celestial Forged Armour 5+, and that's your ward save built in there already. Countercharge, Fear, Fly 9, Impact hits D3+1, Mastery of the Elemental Winds, Swift Stride, Will of Dragons, and then the Iron Talons are Strength as User -1, AP strikes first, and then Crown of Horns is Strength as User -1, Armor Bane 1. Gate Masters of the Celestial Cities. These are your professional soldiers, your leaders of the armies, leaders of your Jade Warriors. And you have the Gate Master and the Gatekeeper, so you've got your Lord level and level below. They're standard human profiles in so many ways, but weapon skill 7 and then 6. And only 80 points for your Lord level, so it's not too expensive for weapon skill 7, but obviously they're human strength and toughness and wounds and attacks and all those other things. Leadership 9 is pretty good, and Leadership 8, so very much sort of standard human empire-ish kind of stat levels there, but again, they're not too expensive. They come with hand weapon, heavy armor and shield included as well, and then they can have the same sort of upgrades. You've got the Celestial Blade and the Cathayan Lance if you want to, and then it can be mounted on the Cathayan Warhorse and the profile if that's below. Magistrates of Grand Cathay, and these are the non-fighty leadership options. They've got elements of engineers from other army lists in there, and also strategy kind of buffs, and that's what they're sort of designed around, and I quite like them. I wonder whether you'll see these in place of having a BSB, especially if points are tight with characters, especially if you're taking a dragon, I suppose, or if you want multiple long mercs, you want more than one magic user as well. You're going to run out of points fast, and maybe you'll be trying to squeeze one of these in and using it in place of a BSB. I think in the game we're seeing a little bit less BSBs than we did in previous editions where they were almost an auto take. And Leadership 9 is pretty good, and that's the same with the strategists as well as the Lord Magistrate level. And if you put them in a Sky Lantern, which they can take, that leadership increases to 12 inches as well, so you've got a nice little bubble there, and I think I can see them being used in the center of an army that way, buffing the troops, spotting for the bombards, and generally sort of filling that sort of generalist role in the center where your other characters, be that they be officially the army general if they're Miao Ying, or you've got a Longma being a little bit more in the thick of the action and fighting and doing magic and things there. But they can take gunpowder bombs, dragonfire bombs, mounted in the Sky Lantern, as I already mentioned, and then your special weapons, your magical weapons, are the same as for all the other characters, for 100 points to 50 points, but very much human stat lines apart from those Leadership 9s, which are nice and high. If they are squishy, you won't be having them fighting in the front line on foot in a unit of Jade Warriors in larger games. Maybe a little fun 500 point game or something did, absolutely, but otherwise probably not, because they're just going to get squished. Special rules, grand strategies, which we'll talk about below in a minute, and then you've got Harmony of Stone and Steel and Will of Dragons, which are army special rules, which we'll cover when we get to that page. But the grand strategies basically means a friendly unit, they win a round of combat, can choose to fall back in good order rather than making a follow-up move, so you've got a little bit more control about positioning post winning combats. So this brings us on to the core of the army, the Jade Warriors and the Jade Lancers. And so your Jade Warriors are basically the same as Empire State veteran troops, but with an extra pip of leadership, so Leadership 8, for a point more. And I think that factors in fairly well. And I'm saying this because I'm reading this before the FAQ and errata has been released, and that may have been released the same day as these coming out. So you might be reading these while watching all these videos. So some of those things I've said could have been adjusted. There might have been a points change, but I can only base it on what I've got at the time of recording this and reading this book. So that's pre FAQ and errata if there are any changes, but there have been rumours around some positives, some bonuses maybe for sword and board, which will help these guys out loads. So they come with hand weapons and heavy armour as standard, which is also an improvement on veteran state troops if we're using that as an example. So that extra point gets you heavy armour over light armour and an extra pip of leadership. So that is, I think, very good for that point there, as it stands. As I said, that's the big caveat there. So they are better than Empire veteran state troops as it is. The entire unit must take one of the following. So these are free upgrades. They also include shields with that as well. So add that into the fact, or halberds. You're swapping out the halberds. So I think shields and swords there, giving you your 4-up save for 8 points, is pretty good, especially if there are future changes to the rules, that a way of doing stuff with there's extra kind of save with your shield there. So I think these are pretty good. They're not cheap, they aren't kind of massed troops. You do fill up your points quite quickly, but they aren't bad at all either. They're not maybe as cheap as I'd like to see all infantry in the game to really get more on the table, but they are pretty good value for what you get, and it's definitely not a case where they are 12 points or something like that, and we're working out where to spend the rest of the points in the army on. Standard upgrades, you've got champion, standard bearer, musician, all 6-point upgrades. The officer can take magic items up to 25 points, and then you can add in drilled and stubborn, and you can purchase a magical standard up to 50 points as well. They have close order, defensive stance, which we'll see in a moment, is really good also. Detachment, which is really useful and really interesting. You can see units of detachments of halberds maybe working alongside, and that saves your points and all of your commands, so that's really interesting. Regimental unit, which again works in hand with detachment, and then Will of Dragons, which is one of the army special rules. And the defensive stance, as you can see here, unless it charged during the preceding movement phase or counts as having charged this turn, a unit with this special rule may re-roll any armor saves of unnatural ones. You're re-rolling ones as well, so you can have your nice shield and your heavy armor and then re-roll ones on those saves. So it makes them quite defensive and pretty survivable compared to some units, all for relatively cheap points, at 8 points without adding any of the little extras to drilled and stuff. I imagine drilled will be added in most cases, maybe stubborn, but definitely drilled. So we're probably looking at 9-point models, which not too bad, not super cheap, but also not too bad. I like them. And then on to their mounted cousins, the Jade Lancers. And you've got the same stat line again as a human, as a relatively elite human. Heavy cavalry, they have hand weapons, Cathayan lances, heavy armour and shields included. And of course your Cathayan warhorses with iron-shod hooves, which count as the hand weapon and barding. And then you've got all of the same upgrades for the unit. So your champion, standard, musician, all at 6 points, magical standard 50 points, Jade officer, magical items at 50 points, and then 0 to 1 unit per 1,000 points may have the ambushes special rule, the drilled special rule, and the stubborn special rule. So you can add those things. I should have mentioned from the Jade Warriors is the same thing, is 0 to 1 per 1,000 points. Special rules: Cathayan cataphracts, close order, countercharge, horde, swift stride, and Will of Dragons as well. And the cataphracts rule basically is when a unit, which the majority of the models have this special rule, makes a follow-up move, the unit counts as having charged again the next turn, which is really, really cool as well. So you can imagine them, if they do well on the charge, and you'll see there with the Jade Lancers, the Cathayan Lancers, as well as a special weapon, or an army special weapon. They do have some punch, and if you can follow up again, you can imagine them rolling through a couple of weaker units anyway. So again, not too bad. They are 20 points a model, so they're not super cheap. How well they compare with some of the other cavalry in the game, I'll leave that up to you. Now we have, it's probably my favourite miniature in the range so far. Absolutely love it. So it's 135 points as a heavy chariot on what I think is a new base size of 100 by 100. 5 crews, you've got 4 lantern gunners and a commander who's your champion. They all come with hand weapons, and the armor save is a 4 up. Lantern gunners and commander must take one of the following. So they can take Sky Lantern crane guns, iron hail guns, and gunpowder bombs. They're free options. And then you can pay for 20 points. You can have iron hail guns and dragonfire bombs. So it gives you a different bomb option. The Sky Lantern may take bombs as well for 15 points. Special rules are close order, disengage, Eye of the Dragon, feigned flight, fire, and flee. Fly 8, heavenly beacon, impact hits D3 +1, Sky Lantern only. Large target, reserve move, scouts, and unbreakable. Eye of the Dragon, friendly models whose weapons shoot during the bombard. Special rule, can shoot using this model's line of sight rather than its own, which is really quite cool as well. So that's going to help you out with your rocket batteries, which we'll see a little bit later on. Disengage affects how it works in combat just slightly. So if you lose a round of combat, if you pass your leadership test, you can fall back in good order rather than giving ground. Enemy units follow up as normal, but cannot pursue it. And if you fail the test, you just give ground as normal. In addition, should you win a round of combat, the model may choose to fall back in good order rather than making a follow-up move or pursuit. Heavenly Beacon, which I think is really cool as well, and one of the reasons it's going to be taken alongside Eye of the Dragon, and it gives you like a little 12-inch bubble for re-rolling failed panic or rally tests for units that can see it. Also gives you a +1 or -1 modifier to the result to determine if a friendly unit with the ambush special rule that is currently held in reserves gets to come on as well. So that is cool. You can manipulate ambush, which is something that's a bit of a problem with the game in some ways. People like ambush, but it's a little bit hard to control and maybe doesn't fall into lots of people's battle plans. And then finally, Lord Magistrate or Strategist mounted in the Sky Lantern has a command range of 12, which I mentioned when I talked about that profile a little bit earlier on. So it provides you with a really nice leadership bubble as well. So leadership bubble, helping you out with your panic and rallying test, helping you out with your ambushes, and then using the way of line of sight for your bombard type troops as well. And for 135 points, that is really good. And you stick your strategist in or your Lord Magistrate, making them more survivable, floating them up in the air, being your general or at least being your leadership bubble, because they can do that anyway, regardless of who's the general. So I think that is pretty cool. Sky Lantern bombs, you can go on a bombing run as well. So this is the offensive use of this, though I'm not sure it's going to be the first reason people take this, but maybe I might be missing something. The bombing run does look really fun. You've got a little char here, roll of 1, premature detonation. That would be embarrassing, wouldn't it? Number 2 is dud, but then 3 to 4 you get a direct hit, and that's a 5-inch large blast. It does scatter D6, but it's strength 5, AP 2, and then 5 and 6 is bombs away, and you get 2 small 3-inch blasts, and they scatter, and again strength 5, AP2. So different kinds of damage there if you roll a 3 to a 6, but again useful. They're not too weak. The strength 5 AP2 is nothing to be sneezed at all. Really good, but I do wonder whether the strategy side of this unit will be used more, and maybe if you have multiple Sky Lanterns in an army, that would be another way to go as well. So it'll be really interesting to see what builds people take. I've owned one because I've been sent one very kindly by Games Workshop, and the list I wrote, only one fits in, but that's trying to fit in everything that I've been sent. But we'll talk about that a little bit more in my sort of final thoughts of the army. And then we've got the rules for the Iron Hail Gun and the Sky Lantern Crane Guns. So Iron Hail Gun is 12-inch, strength 3, -1, AP move and shoot multiple shots D3. And then you've got the Sky Lantern Crane Gun, which is 36 inches, strength 6, -2 AP, armor bane 2, and cumbersome. So that's a pretty nasty shot, that one. So again, they're nothing to be sneezed at as well either. And you've got those regardless of whether you're making it more of an offensive unit with the bombing runs, or whether you're holding back and having your Lord Magistrate in there commanding a bubble. I think you're floating there in staying in one place, commanding your units, giving them all these little buffs with Heavenly Beacon, and giving your rockets a buffs with the bombardment special rule. I think standing there and then shooting at 36 inches at strength 6, -2 AP and armor bane is pretty good as well. So they've definitely got some legs here, some nice little extras. I think these are great for 135 points. And moving on to the next really big centerpiece model, and that's the Cathay Sentinels. Really, really huge miniature. Really looking forward to showing you my painted versions in the coming future of the next couple of weeks, and a tutorial on it, I'm sure, as well. But let's have a look at the stat line. So the Cathay Sentinel is 230 points, and it's a behemoth, unsurprisingly, with a massive base size of 100 by 150, hand weapon, which is the Great Blade, and terracotta armor counts as heavy armor. Now you can change the flavor of your Sentinel as following. So the terracotta Sentinel is free, that's the standard profile. Then you can choose between the Jade Sentinel, the Obsidian Sentinel, the Granite Sentinel, and the Warpstone Sentinel, and we'll talk about what those mean in a moment. Special rules: close order, immune to psychology, implacable, large target, stomp attacks D3+1, terror, timber, and unbreakable. Implacable: once per game during the turn in which it's charged, it may choose not to give ground should it lose a round of combat, which is quite interesting. In addition, once per game, this model may re-roll a charge roll as well. So really useful little special rule there that I'm sure will come in very handy at a given point in a game. And then we have the weapons. We've got Scything Blow, which is strength as user, -2 AP, armor bane 1, extra attacks plus 2d3, and strike last. And then Deadly Strike, combat user +1, -4 AP, killing blow, monster slayer, multiple wounds D3. So this is gonna be a big monster slayer, pretty straightforward there. That could be pretty devastating if used in the right thing. So I think these are going to become useful pieces that are going to be targeted Then we have your different flavours of Sentinels. So they come as Terracotta as standard, which basically gives you the 6-up regen raw. The Jade Sentinel gives you a bound spell, essentially from battle magic or elementalism, gives you a spell from those lists that may be chosen before the armies are deployed. It casts as a bound spell with a level of 3, so that's a different sort of vibe going on there. But again, I can see that being really interesting down in the front line, especially with your battle magic. I think we all know where that's going to go. Obsidian Sentinel, this is one I think that's interesting me to start with. I haven't painted it yet. I will stick to whatever it gets painted as, I suppose. But it has a magical resistance -2, and I think it could get targeted quite a lot by spells, seeing how dangerous it's likely to be in combat. Very much bring it down before it does any damage. But also, I really like this as well. The enemy wizard that wishes to cast a spell whilst within 12 inches of one or more Obsidian Sentinels must first take a leadership test. If the test is failed, the wizard's casting roll suffers a -3 modifier. And even if the test is passed, they're still casting at a -1 modifier. So it's making it harder to cast magic, as well as having that inbuilt magic resistance for itself as well. And not all magicians have a super high leadership. There are some leadership sort of 7 and 8 magicians out there as well. So they could fail those tests, could reduce their strength of casting spells. I quite like that as a bit of a debuff. Whether it's the best thing, I don't know. I think the Jade Sentinel will be a lot of people's choice as well. Granite Sentinel improves its armor value by 1. In addition, the Granite Sentinel has immune to multiple wounds. So again, this gives it that defense against itself being taken out before it goes and does its damage. If the Granite Sentinel suffers an unsaved wound from attack, with this special rule, it loses a single wound. So it definitely keeps it alive longer. And then we have the Warpstone Sentinel. The Warpstone Sentinel has the magic attack special rule. In addition, whilst in base-to-base contact with 2 or more Warpstone Sentinels, enemy units suffers a -1 modifier to their toughness characteristic. Again, useful, but I think you're looking at Jade, Obsidian or Granite maybe. I'm not sure which is best, and maybe one shouldn't be best. I quite like the idea that they give you different benefits depending on how you want to play your armies. But I like these. I really like the rules for them. I think they look great on the table, and it'd be interesting to see how people use them, and if there's people out there that end up trying to spam them in an army list, which I'm sure will happen as well. Then we move on to the artillery, which as it stands is really the only ranged attack of this army. And as an army that's built quite defensively from its units, you want people to come to you in many ways, maybe while attacking them with Sentinels and bombing runs of Lanterns and maybe Lancers, but you kind of want to be charged. You want your Jade Warriors to be charged with some of those special rules, and you're building out solid line. So you're probably going to see a lot of artillery in Cathay armies for now, taking up that range stuff. I imagine people will be maxing those out, or at least having 2 in a limited roster. So let's see how they look on the table. So fire, rain, rocket, battery. So your standard human crews, you expect leadership 730 points, 60 by 100 base for the war machine. Hand weapons, light armor, and you can have an ogre loader for 35 points, and we'll talk about the rules for that in a moment, but it's down to what they shoot is the main thing here. And both options are bombardment, and you've got that synergy with the Sky Lantern, and I think that's really quite important. So the Bastion rockets are 12 to 48, strength 4, 5 under the hull, -1 AP, -3 under the hull, armor bane 1. So they can be quite powerful, especially under the hull. Really, really good. Move or shoot comes them, but multiple wounds D6. You think that you land something on the -3 AP, armor bane 1, and multiple wounds D6, and you roll high there, you're going to be causing lots of damage. So these are quite powerful, especially if it's something that shoots like a stone thrower. But with that bombardment rule, will definitely help give you line of sight as well, so that's really important. It's a 3-inch blast, but you use the Blackfire misfire table. But the multiple wounds D6 special rule applies only to a single model whose base lies underneath that center hole as well. It's not everything, because that would be crazy, but I think that's still pretty good. The rocket battery also 12 to 48, strength 3 or 4 under the hull, -1 AP throughout. Armor bane 1, bombardment, cumbersome, flaming attacks this time, move or shoot still, waning spirits, and it's a 5-inch blast this time, but shoots like a stone thrower. But the Waning Spirits, any unit that suffers 1 or more unsaved wounds from this weapon must make a panic test as if it had taken heavy casualties. So again, this is kind of flowing your rockets up into the air and scaring your lower leadership troops, probably, especially with a larger blaster, depending on what you're trying to target, whether you're trying to kill something more powerful or heavily armored, or whether you're trying to cause panic in the ranks and maybe take some squishy troops out. But some good use for both of these. I think they're not overpowered or anything like that, but they definitely have some use and can kill things as well. Cathay Grand Cannon. So this is the other build for that miniature that can be built in both ways. 5 points cheaper at 130 points, same crew stat lines and base sizes and all the rest, and can also have an ogre loader for 35 points. The Grand Cannon is range 48, strength 10, -3 AP, armor bane 3, cannon fire, cumbersome, move or shoot, multiple wounds D3+1, thunderous impact. And the thunderous impact is until the start of the next turn subphase, any unit, friend or foe, that was within 2d6 inches of the strike point when the Cathay Grand Cannon shoots suffers a -1 modifier to its move characteristic and cannot use Swift Stride special rule. So you've got to be careful where you're aiming that if you've got your own troops around. But it's that big and loud a bang that it causes that problem. And at strength 10 AP -3 and armor bane 3, again, this is quite tasty. And I imagine a couple of these in an army and a couple of the rocket batteries in a lot of armies may edge towards the competitive build for this Cathay list, along with a dragon and minimal Jade Warriors probably. But we'll see how that FAQ and errata changes that and leads people down a different path. But we're not done talking about those war machines. We have the Ogre Artillery crew. Nice Ogre stats there. 35 points extra, 40 mil base, etc, etc. He may take gunpowder bombs, and if he takes gunpowder bombs, he's got the enough for everyone special rule, which basically means that everyone in the crew gets them as well. So he's dishing out these gunpowder bombs to his friends in the crew of the cannon. But the main reason is Mercenary crew. An Ogre Loader is a special type of character that can be taken as an upgrade to accompany a Cathayan war machine. During deployment, position the Ogre Loader as if they were a character, and once they're with that model, they stay with it just the same way as you would for other engineers and things in other armies. The crew of any war machine joined by the Ogre Loader gains a +1 modifier to its movement characteristic and the stubborn special rule. In addition, once per game, a fire rain rocket battery or a Cathay Grand Cannon includes an Ogre Loader may fire twice during the shooting phase or reroll a single artillery dice. And that's why you're taking it, really, not for the movement, not for the stubborn. That might be useful. It's that firing twice in most cases, but maybe re-rolling the artillery dice as well. But that firing twice could make a fire phase really, really, really devastating. I can imagine you're causing lots of damage if you roll well. It's all dice dependent, of course, but if you're taking lots of these things, you definitely increase your odds there of doing some serious damage early on. So that's the end of all the unit entries. We're now getting into that stage with the army special rules, the magic items, the spell laws, and so to speak. So let's take a look at those. So we'll go with the order that's in the book. I think the army special rules are bizarre at the back. I would have them after the army selection composition list, but that's just the way my brain works. So we have Empire of Grand Cathay magic items, and as usual they start more expensive and work their way down. And then the magic weapons, the big points item is the Monkey King's Wisdom at 75 points. Combat strength 10, -4 AP, magical attacks, multiple wounds D3, requires 2 hands, strike last. So this is your big fighty weapon. We see one in each of the Arcane Journals, and this is the same there. Loads of fun, big and expensive, and I think expensive is the thing that they don't always get taken. Jade Blade of Great Fleet, 70 points as well, another really big expensive item. Combat strength +2, -2 AP, armor bane 1, magical attacks, regen 5+. So the wielder of the Jade Blade of the Great Fleet gains the regen 5+ special rule. So you're getting a double whack. They're a really, really tough weapon, but you're having regen built in. So that 70 points suddenly becomes more affordable in my mind, because you're building in what would be the cost of a 5-up regen, maybe 25, 30, maybe even 40 points depending on some lists, and then the strength boosting, AP boosting weapon as well. So that's quite cool. I think that might happen at some point for some armies for sure. Spirit Longmer Spiel, 25 points combat, strength +1, -3 AP, armor bane 1, magical attacks. So it needs to be a cavalry or a chariot because this is a big long spear. Not too expensive there, nice little buff, especially with a -3 AP. I think that will get taken. I think we'll see that. Sun and Moon Blades, 20 points. And combat strength as user, -1 AP, extra attacks. You get an extra attack for your 20 points, making them magical attacks as well. And if the wielder of the Sun and Moon Blades is struck a killing blow, roll a 6 on a roll of a 4 up, the killing blow is parried and the killing blow is discarded with no further effect. Again, so for that 20 points, you're getting an extra attack, magical attacks, but also some protection against killing blow, which I think is pretty cool just for 20 points. Magic armor, we'll start with Armor of the Warbird at 45 points, which essentially gives the bearer the ability to countercharge, fly, and swift strike special rules. However, they cannot join a unit. Shield of Nangao at 20 points. When the bearer is charged, they improve their armor value by 2 to a maximum of 2+. We move on to Talismans, the Crystal of Kunlan at 35 points. The crystal gives the bearer a 5+ ward save against any wounds suffered. In addition, if a natural 6 is rolled when making the ward save, every enemy model in base contact with the bearer suffers a strength 3 hit at an AP dash. These attacks have the Flaming Attacks special rule as well. And then we've got the Crown of Jade, 20 points. The Crown of Jade gives the bearer a 4+ ward save against any wounds suffered that were caused by a magic missile, a magical vortex, or an assailment spell. Not too expensive. I think these things will see play within certain army list builds. Now we move on to standards, and we have the Banner of Wei Jin for 40 points, and the unit carrying the standard of Wei Jin causes fear. In addition, all enemy units within 12 inches of the model carrying the standard suffer a -1 onto their leadership characteristic when making fear, panic, and terror tests. Icon of Heavenly Fury for 35 points. It's a single use, but this shuts down a fly for a turn, and we've seen this in other Arcane Journals, and very, very useful in the way the game is at its current time. So I think for 35 points, that's probably worth squeezing in your army if you can find the points for it. Dragon's Eye Banner at 30 points. When an enemy wizard chooses a unit carrying the Dragon's Eye banner as a target of a spell, roll a d6. On a 3+, the wizard's controlling player must choose another target. If there is no other viable target in range, the spell cannot be cast. So again, a really nice kind of little buff to help protect you against magic, which is pretty cool. Like, not too expensive, so I think it will see some play. And then Banner of the Bastion, 25 points. Unit carrying the Banner of the Bastion gains the Shield Wall special rule. Enchanted items, and we're starting with the Morshard at 40 points. If an enemy wizard rolls any natural double when making a casting roll whilst within 18 inches of the bearer of the Morshard, the spell is miscast regardless of the casting result. That's pretty cool. 40 points is edging towards the expensive, especially as the games where it doesn't work and no one rolls a double, that you'll feel like it's wasted points. But also 18 inches is quite a big bubble, and if you're rolling doubles and you're trying to cast, that could be a real pain in the bum if you are the opposing wizard. So we'll see that. It'll be really interesting to see whether people think that's worth it at 40 points or not. The positive effect of it is definitely very good. Alchemist's Mask, 35 points, basically means the wearer can cast Plague of Rust from the Law of Elementalism at the power level of 3 as a bound spell, and we see similar items in the other Arcane Journals. Useful, definitely, if you like that spell and you feel the use of it in the synergy of your army. Spirit Lantern, this is a common item, 25 points. A model carrying the Spirit Lantern causes terror. In addition, a model carrying the Spirit Lantern may re-roll any rolls to wound of a natural 1 against models that are demonic or undead. And finally, the arcane items, and we're starting with the Cloak of Po Mi for 50 points. And this essentially gives the bearer the ability to know the whole of the law of Yin or Yang rather than just the one that they swap out for their signature spells. If you like those whole laws and you want to run it as a whole law, and we'll see those in a moment, they're laws of 3 spells, you can pay 50 points and have the whole lot. And we've seen this as an access thing to certain laws of magic in the previous 2 Arcane Journals. This is a little bit more pricey. It gives you number of spells as well, but you can only cast a number to your wizardry level, so you know all of those spells. So if you pay your 50 points, I suppose even on a level 2 you'd know all 3, you get to choose, but Whether that's good enough or not, I don't know. 50 points is expensive. It's not something that it's going to be easy to fit into army lists. But if you really like the laws, and I think they're quite good, and we'll see in a moment, it might be something that you want to take. Then we got the Guardian of Feng Shi Bo for 35 points, and that's a common item as well. The enemy model that directs its attacks against the owner of the Guardian of Feng Shi Bo during the combat phase suffers a -1 modifier to its rolls to hit. And then we've got Learned Fen Shibo for 15 points. The owner of Learned Fen Shibo knows one more spell chosen in the user way that's normal for their wizarding level, so you get to know one extra spell, which is for 15 points I think we'll see quite a lot of. Now for the Army of Grand Cathay special rules. I can kind of understand why it's at the back near all the magical items and things, but also feels like it would fit nicely towards the front of the army list because it's the special rules for the whole army. However, it doesn't make a big difference. I know most reviewers who go straight to the rules read these bits first because they do make an effect on when you're reading out the unit entries and mention special rules that we're only alluding to later. I appreciate that. Logically, that makes sense. I like to read these books in order because I'm reviewing it as it's presented and I'm trying to think of it in that way. But anyway, let's have a little look at those rules. So we have the Celestial Forged Armor, which is basically a ward save, and the value of that ward save is what the X is. Pretty straightforward. We've seen that already in a couple of the profiles. Mastery of the Elemental Winds. Once per turn, a wizard within your army that has this special rule, and it is within 6 inches of one or more friendly wizards that also have this special rule may apply +1 to modifying casting roll. This is quite an interesting one because at the moment your magic users are obviously the dragon or your Shigengan Lord on Longma. Maybe they'll be next to each other. I wonder if this will be more useful when you've got more magical options in the future. But it's there. It's a special rule that I can't see coming up too often the way you may play this army, but we will see. Will of Dragons. A unit with this special rule may re-roll a failed panic test when a friendly unit is destroyed within 6 inches of it or has fled through an enemy unit. Again, this gives them an extra sort of buff about the professional soldiers all together, and you've got those leadership buffs, you've got that anti-panic stuff already going on from your magistrate, and this kind of adds 2 layers of this army being professional, trained, stoic, and not running away. And that's definitely the vibe of the army, that it's an elite army and it's regimented and it's disciplined. And the next part is the elemental winds, and this is very much with the theme of the whole army and linked in with the magic as well. So we've got the winds of Yang and the winds of Ying. So during each start of turn subphases, the Grand Cathay player rolls a d6 to determine which of the following elemental winds blows the strongest, essentially. So on a roll of 1 to 3, we got the winds of Yang. On the roll of 4+, we get the winds of Ying. And then the different rules that apply to that. So the winds of Yang. Until the start of your next turn subphase, wizards with the law of Yang increase their dispel range and range of enchantment spells they know by 3 inches. In addition, all friendly models with the Will of Dragons rule gain 1 of the following modifiers: +1 movement, +1 initiative. And then with the winds of Ying, until the start of the next turn subphase, wizards with the law of Ying special rule increase the range of hex or magic missile spells they know by 3 inches. In addition, all friendly models with the Will of Dragon special rule gain 1 of the following modifiers, so +1 weapon skill, +1 leadership. I really love this. Loads of theme, useful on the table. Obviously it's 50-50 which one you get, and no doubt you will find at times that you get the opposite to the one you really wanted, but they will have some uses here. Sometimes it will do absolutely nothing, but there will be moments in games where those little buffs and the way the wind blows completely changes the outcome of a combat, and something's really important, and maybe even the game. And I love that built into the game. That's fun, that's thematic, and useful, and has real-time table effects as well. So with the yin and the yang in mind, let's have a look at both of those laws. So they're laws with 3 spells in that work like some of the laws do in previous Arcane Journals, where they substitute your signature spell and you're making a choice out of which ones, unless you take that magical item which lets you take the whole law. But the law of the Yang, a wizard with the law of Yang special rule, and you have to select at the time of your army list, whether they're going to be Yang or Ying, may discard one of their randomly generated spells as normal. When they do so, they may select, instead of the signature spell of that chosen law, may select one of these spells, and it works exactly the same for the Law of the Yin. So you have the Constellation of the Dragon, which is a magic missile, casting value 7+ or 11+, range 18. If this spell is cast with a casting result of 7 or more, the target enemy unit suffers d6 +1 strength 4 hits at a AP dash. If this spell is casting is 11 or more, and then you 2d6 +2 strength 4 hits with an AP of 1. So a magic missile that's not to be sneezed at there at all. Great Bastion Enchantment, casting value 9+, range 12. It's a remains in play spell that gives the unit, the target, a 6 ward save. In addition, the unit that charges that unit's front rank treats it as dangerous terrain, so takes a dangerous terrain test. Any wounds suffered by that gets added to the combat result. The targeted unit itself can't march or charge as well, though. And then we have Might of Heaven and Earth, which is also an enchantment, 9+ or 12+, range self. If this spell is cast with a casting result of 9 or more, the caster, their mount, and any unit they have joined gain a +1 modifier to their weapon skill and strength characteristics to a maximum of 10, and gain the Flaming Attack special rule. If this spell has a casting value of 12 or more, all friendly units that are within the caster's command range when this spell is cast gain a +1 modifier to their weapon skill and strength characteristic, and blah blah blah. So it's on the unit they're in or the command range depending on the casting value. Law of Yin, and we got Spirits of Wind and Shadow. It's a casting value 10 hex, range 15. Until the start of the next turn subphase, the target enemy unit becomes subject to the random movement special rule, which would be quite annoying, I imagine. A Cursed Mirror. It's a hex, casting value 9+, range 15. To the start of the next turn subphase, any rolls to hit of a natural 1 made by the target enemy unit during either shooting or in combat result in a strength 3 minus AP 1 hit against that unit. So this target may target enemy units engaged in combat as well. So that's quite nice. When your opponent is already sad from rolling ones and finds those attacks bounce back on them. And finally, Ancestral Warriors, and an assailment, casting value of 7 or 11, range combat. If this spell is cast with a casting result of 7 or more, a single enemy unit the caster is engaged in combat with suffers 2d3 strength through hits with an AP of dash. If this spell is cast with a higher level, then it's 2d6 strength 4 hits with an AP of -1. This spell has the Armor Bane 2 special rule. I think there's some nice spells there. Nothing seems to be sort of absolutely game changing. They need good rolls. There's some good offensive spells there. I really like the Cursed Mirror as well. Again, it depends who you're coming up against. If you're coming up against units that are small and there's not many attacks going in, then you might not feel like it's giving you much of a benefit. If you're going against big blocks of poisoned archers, there's going to be quite a lot of ones thrown in those dice rolls just by the averages, and to have those attacks bouncing back could be quite interesting as well. I'll be really interested to know what people think of those spells. They feel like it's nicely balanced along the lines of, well, that would be nice, but he might not go off, rather than this is just an auto take, really powerful thing. That all of those have some really good situational uses, I think, but also you can see them not coming off and not working, and maybe that's the nice level of the game design there, where it's balanced along the middle. But really thematic, really like it. I'm interested to know what you think about it. And finally, the last page of the book was the Grand Cathay Armory, and we'll start with the Cathay Lance, which is the weapon that the Jade Lancers have on their horses. So his strength is user +1, -1 AP, Armor Bane, fighting extra rank as well, which is very cool. You imagine your big units of 10 cavalry in 2 ranks there, getting lots of attacks in there on the charge, and then maybe following up using their special rule as well afterwards. I like that a lot. Celestial Blade, this is one of the options that your characters may take. So it's +1 strength, -1 AP, but strike first, which is really cool as well. The Dragonfire Pistol, it's range 12, strength 5, -1 AP, flaming attacks, multiple shots too as well, and quick shot. They're not to be sneezed at there if you've got the points, and these things aren't super expensive. Some really useful standard weapons there are slightly different to the sort of the things that are available across all armies. Gunpowder bombs, range 9, only strength 3, but the armor bay 1, move and shoot and quick shot. So a nice little bit of a sort of defensive fire there. Dragon fire bombs, slightly higher strength, store range 9, strength 4, -1 AP, armor bay 1, flaming attacks, move and shoot and quick shot. So not an awful lot there as well. I think all of those things have their use. The lance is great. Celestial blade will definitely be taken because it's not too expensive, and I think the dragonfire pistol may turn up a little bit as well. And that's it. That's the book. I love the theme. I love the flavour throughout. It feels nicely balanced throughout. You definitely need more units to round it out and really get a full opinion of it. So it'll be very interesting to see what armies look like. I designed an army with the miniatures that I was kindly sent. I've got everything but the dragon at this stage, and that essentially does build you a 2,000 point army list there or thereabouts, with magic items. You might need a few more warriors if you wanted to, but it really depends on how you build it in, with which versions of Sentinel and things you take. You can quite easily fill it out without doing that. So you can make a full 2,000 point army list from the battalion, a Longma, and a Sentinel and a Sky Lantern as well. You can go and do that. So you've got your 2 artillery, and then you've got your 2 units. You obviously want bigger units than 15. So whether you want to run a larger unit and have a detachment, or build them up to sort of 20 size. And I'm using a unit filler, and I'll probably buy some extra Jade Warriors, etc., to fill those units out. But there or thereabouts, you get a 2,000 point army list without the dragon. If you've got the dragon in there, you're planning on buying the dragon at 485 points. It's very easy to make an army out of what is there. How the builds will go, I don't know. As I said throughout this video, I'm taking into effect the meta as it currently was for the way people are thinking. I play narratively and casually as well anyway, but the way people talk about the game in general, about infantry not being great and all of that kind of stuff, I can imagine builds where people are having a minimum amount of Jade Warriors with sword and board, and then maybe extra Jade Lancers, especially with that lance looks pretty good, and the special rules about following up, so they should hit quite hard and they're quite survivable as well. Magic's decent but not overpowering, but you've got lots of other laws in there as well. I think you're restricted a little bit about taking extra magic users, because you might not want to on Longmire. Your points suddenly start to disappear quite quickly then, so you may well find you've got 1 level 4 at the moment, or the dragon and maybe a Longmire and a level 2, so that there won't be too many different versions of lists out there. But I'm sure we'll see Sky Lantern spam, and I'm sure we will see a Sentinel spam as well. I'm really interested to see what people use. I like the idea of the Sentinel maybe being in the centre of the lines, doing that magical defence and the debuff around a couple of blocks of the infantry. I think that's the way the game wants to work, and hopefully if there's any changes in the errata and FAQ that support that even further, that will be brilliant to see, than having a Longmire rider shooting magic and going around, flying around and being dangerous. And I quite like the idea of a grand strategist there being your general in the balloon, buffing your artillery and buffing your panic and your leadership bubble and stuff. It feels like that's the way it wants to work. Competitively, I don't know, and I won't play too many games like that anyway, so I will be building my army out of that battalion box the way it's kind of designed, and I think it works to that, and that's the way this book is written. I hope that some changes in the match play guide, look out for that review coming up soon. I've already filmed and recorded it. I'm sure if you're watching this on launch weekend, and this will probably be the first video I release out of lots and lots of videos, that people will have already been discussing that anyway, and there'll already be content, and I will be following up with that after stuff on the miniatures and this book, because that's my love, is the game as a whole, not just the competitive side. But that match play guide has some really nice things in it as well. It's going to make you want to take more infantry in games, so I hope that kind of supports that, and we don't just see people maxing out on Jade Lancers with a minimum unit of foot warriors and then loads and loads of the other stuff. But I am really looking forward to this growing and seeing whatever they follow up this with. But you definitely want a magic user on foot. You definitely want more missile troops, so Jade Warriors with crossbows. I really think that kit, and you'll see with that video when you get to it, I really think that kit, the way it's designed, you remove one of the frames, which is a separate frame that has all of the halberds and things on. I think you could swap that out for to a crossbow. I don't know if that's what they've done, but I wouldn't be surprised if that same sculpt was almost repackaged in that way in the future. So hopefully we'll see something like that. I'd also love to see peasants and things as well that we know are in the Total War 3 computer game. It will give you a different kind of troop, but I think that might come along when we see other dragons from different provinces away from Nangao. That might all happen at the same time. I hope it does, but at the moment that the roster is limited, have patience with it. It is a beautiful new thing, a brand new army, all plastic, lovely, lovely miniatures. So if you're interested in that and you're excited by it, go ahead and do it. Understand that it's got a limited army roster to start with. It's just the way it is. We're lucky to kind of have this brand new army, and we just have to be patient as fans of Warhammer the Old World, knowing that this will become a more rounded army list out there. But I think they've done a really, really good job with what's there. I'm sure there'll be a few people that will be, oh, is that all that's in the list? And when I first looked at the book, I did think, oh, it's a shame there isn't another unit or two in there. And the ability to take a Shigengan Lord on foot, even if the miniature doesn't exist at the moment, would have been nice. I'd have liked to have seen that in there, or a second magic user, another profile, and maybe a resin miniature coming out as a second or third wave. That would have been nice. I think it would have made the unit, the list a bit more flexible, so you could have gone even more units and not have the Lord on the Flying Beast. It's the only way to get your magic user, but it's not a criticism. I appreciate what they've done as a package with those miniatures, and I'm really been enjoying painting up the armies. I'm really looking forward to bringing all those painting videos, including a big army painting video, to you very, very soon. So if you're not subscribed to the channel already, make sure you are subscribed so you can catch all of those videos. And let me know in the comments below what you think. I really, really, really want to know what you think of the army, what you're planning on doing, little tidbits of lore. Are you going to try different provinces, regardless of whether the rules are there for them or not at the moment? Just talk in the comments, tell me all about what you think of this release, and what you're planning on doing, because it's a really, really exciting time. So with all that said, if you have enjoyed the video, please do drop a comment below, because it helps the video. Give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. If you'd like to support me and the channel, please do check out my Patreon. There's lots of different tiers and different levels on there, and it's a really good way of getting support with your hobby and painting, because primarily that's what I do. I'm a painter, I'm an army painter, and I do lots of teaching and tuition and things as well. But if you just like to support the channel, you can support me at a lower price level as well, and it's always really appreciated. Do check out the channel sponsors, links in there. Counterattack Bases are a great small UK business, lots of counters. I'm sure they'll be bringing out counters that match all the spells and things for this book very, very soon. So cool things to check out there as well. Check out the channel's Discord as well, very friendly hobby chat always in there. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.